Fishing rod, lures, 2 ice picks, a kindling bundle, a piece of flint but no steel, 2 ice picks made of iron, a small hand axe, also iron, dried sunberries, bitter greens for fever and white leaf for infection. It wasn't enough for survival. I could last a day or 2 on these supplies, but with the burden of the beast with me, I wouldn't last through tomorrow. "We need food," I grumbled, putting my things back carelessly. "You need food," he corrected me. "I need people." "You eat people?" I exclaimed. "What? No, what's wrong with you?" He shook his head slowly. "I need to be around people to eat. You're not giving me much of a chance to have a meal here." "What do you even eat?" I asked slowly, not necessarily wanting to know the answer. Someone titled Gullet Beast was likely a feaster of many horrors. "Mostly pain, some suffering, some loneliness, some grief. You know the deal," he said casually. I felt myself turn red with anger. "Does this mean you stole my fish when you didn't even need to eat?" I roared. His eyes shifted away uneasily. I like fish," he murmured, as if that would be a satisfactory answer. I didn't break my angry gaze, and he tried to deflect via explanation. "Look, here's how it works. Back in the days of Arisardo, before Arisardo actually, my people were alive and we fed on—" "I don't care!" I snapped, securing my pack across my shoulders and marching away. "We need to get to a city. I need gear and you need people, apparently. The nearest one is 3 days away. If we don't start now, we'll both die before we get there." I began an angered march into the trees before I could get a response from him. I didn't want to hear a word out of his mouth, and I hardly wanted to travel with him. But on the off chance he would be useful to me, I agreed to take him along. Plus, he knew about the thing in my head. I would have rather died than be alone with that hooded figure. The first day of our journey crawled along at the speed of a slug. We had headed south, intercepting and following what remained of the river that had previously flowed beside my village. It was frozen over this time of year, the ice reaching all the way down to the bed of the stream. There was absolute stillness, and no noise from the ice. No noise from the beast, either. We'd walked in blissful silence all day. I was able to navigate, and he was able to fumble after me. From the way he tripped and stumbled through the forest, I assumed he was very unused to this kind of terrain. As we walked along, my curiosity began to get the better of me. Begrudgingly, I broke the silence that had lasted between us for hours. "Why are you all the way out here anyway? You don't seem like you know the forest very well," I said, trudging ahead. "I told you, I was chasing the thing that ate your village," he answered, tripping over a root and rapidly catching his footing. "Right. And what exactly is it again?" I shuddered slightly as I remembered the horrid, hooded forms in my dreams last night. "A monster," he replied simply. Annoyed by the lack of elaboration, I turned to glare at him. "Okay, and what does that mean? Is it like you?" "Not exactly." He paused to hop over an abandoned foxhole. "There were hundreds and thousands of my people before Arisardo, and we weren't called beasts. That's a name your people gave us." "Okay, then what are you?" "That's complicated. It's been so many years and I'm so far removed from my original culture that there isn't really a word left that describes what I am. So, a beast," I said evenly. He rolled his eyes. Yeah, let's just say that," he muttered. "I'm the last one around as far as I know. I was one of the youngest, and for some reason the only one to get famous." He skirted between 2 trees. "But the thing that ate your village is much, much older. It was ancient even when I was young, and still ancient when the oldest of my people were around. As far as we know, it's walked since the beginning of time, and—" "Okay, I get it. It's old. But what is it? I'm getting to that. You need to know its relationship with my people first," he muttered, increasingly irked by my impatience. "And what are your people? How does it all work?" "We're parasites," he said, then saw my annoyance at the non-answer and smartly decided to elaborate. "When humans first started to spread out, my people, the beasts, as you call them, showed up. We aren't magic or anything like that, but we feed on things that aren't physical. There were ones who ate joy and laughter, some ate anger. I eat grief, he explained. I nodded very slowly, suddenly understanding why he was hungry despite being around me. I was not grieving the loss of my village, offering him no meal. No wonder he thought I was strange. So why has this thing not been seen before? I feel like someone would have heard about entire towns being devoured. Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. My people can stay alive as long as we eat. That's why I'm still around. I've never gone hungry. The thing must have been lying dormant for thousands of years, but I'm not sure how that's possible. It must have some other way of staying alive, he said contemplatively. What if someone was feeding it? I asked, almost without thinking. I heard him pause briefly behind me, thinking hard. I hadn't thought about that, he murmured, seeming a bit pale. Clearly, the very thought scared him. I felt myself grow a bit smug at the idea of his fear. For some reason, it felt good to have him off kilter for once. We'd found an overhang under a small cliff to camp in for our first night. I reached into my bag, eating some of my dried berries, but trying to conserve as many as possible for the next day in case I couldn't catch anything. It was all I needed for now. The events of the last couple of days made me lose my appetite. I laid my head down on my pack and stared into the fire until my eyes grew heavy. I was not looking forward to my haunted dreams tonight, but I bore it nonetheless. My feet were wet. I let my gaze drift downward slowly, but I did not yet see my bottom half. My eyes kept falling, my head traveling downward for what felt like years. In fact, I must have flipped myself around no less than twice before my gaze finally settled on the ground underneath me. Only, there was no ground. I was standing in a hand's length of water, my bare feet soaked and chilled in it. There was nothing around me in any direction, merely a weak gray haze which blurred the horizon into the ever-reaching gray sky. Neither appearing nor arriving, but suddenly present, was the thing that ate my village. It floated above the water by an inch, the ends of its robes dripping down into the waters but leaving no ripples. The darkness behind its hood stared into my eyes like the entrance of a great cave, menacing me with intrigue, roughly 10 feet back and 5 feet higher than my head. I could hear its breath rasping as it stood, sounding like air hissing through the ancient stone hallways of the north. It did not speak a word of man's language, yet I could somehow understand it.
To eat.
What? I asked, nearly shocked by the sound of my voice. The flat waters carried my words far, and they boomed loudly, reaching the thing's awareness to its great distaste.
To eat.
It said slower, as if forcing me to understand. To eat. What could this have meant? Did it want to eat? Was it stating a fact, an intention, a command? Could it have been a verb? Kahina? I asked back, unsure why I was drawn to this language in particular. It was one of many words I knew from ancient Rapsilian, as I've already told you, the language spoken by the people of Arisardo. For some reason, hearing this thing try to attempt my language felt hopeless. I needed to speak on its level rather than it on mine. Its ethereal body rippled and shuddered with unexpected comprehension of the word. Kahina, to eat. Kahina ve, appetite. Kahina ve elveki tuze. The one with the beastly appetite, which would later be translated into the gullet beast of Arisardo, in the common man's tongue. I watched as the thing rippled in rage and screeched, casting its fists into the water in deep frustration, or perhaps some kind of anguish. It recognized my words. Perhaps that was what it sought. It screamed back into my mind in Rapsilian. For the first time in my life, I was glad for my knowledge of the dead language. The one who I curse cowardly runs from me. It's hard to translate smoothly. Fuck off. I had more questions than answers rising up at this point. I shouted back to it in its language, wishing to know why it chased after the gullet beast. Perhaps if I could solve this, I could help the beast stop this thing from doing more harm. However, it raised one hand and pointed a cragged finger at me. I felt myself freeze in apprehension. Its voice came to me again, this time crystal clear in my language. It has occurred to me that perhaps my very first mistake was conversing with a monster of indescribable proportion. The very amalgamation of all humanity's failures, it exists solely to prey on our fears, our doubts, and our insecurities. In my foolish naivety to speak with it in a language which had been dead for centuries, I had been letting it inside of my head, not just to speak, but to learn.
You will lead me to the coward.
My eyes burned. As I stared towards the barren canopy over my head, the meager rays of sun that managed to reach through the clouds burned against my vision like smoke. I rubbed my eyes, hoping for tears to well up and solve the pain, but they never came. Dehydration was surely the cause. I reached for my water, frowning at the meager amount I had left. With 2 days left in our journey, I could hardly survive on this. "Hey," I said sharply, but received no response. I hadn't even checked to see if my friend was awake yet. That would be my second mistake, giving an infamous cryptid a single sliver of my trust or consideration. He lay sleeping on his side, his head tucked crookedly into the bend of his arm. He looked both horrifically uncomfortable and unfathomably peaceful. Some distant part of me felt the urge to leave him in peace and get the water myself, but this didn't stop me from reaching my hand into the morning inch of frost and packing a snowball to launch at his face. I hit my target dead on, watching in amusement as he sputtered awake and bolted upright. "What was that for?" he exclaimed, hurriedly brushing the snowy fragments of my assault off his clothes. I laughed, a good hearty laugh from deep in my chest, certainly my first in a while, and threw him the canteen. "I need more water. Get some from the river while I pack up camp," I said, standing and giving my limbs a much-needed stretch. He stomped away towards the river, snatching my ice pick as he left. "You could at least say please," he muttered, but he was going to do the task nonetheless, so I disregarded his comment. There was a newfound lightness in me for some reason. Perhaps this journey wouldn't be as dreary as I thought.